Maya Chen was 15 years old when she realized she could walk through her entire day without a single person actually looking at her. Not really looking. Not the way people look at things that matter. It wasn't always like this. There were baby photos somewhere in the house showing a chubby toddler surrounded by smiling relatives. There were old birthday videos her mom took when Maya was 7, blowing out candles while kids from her class sang off-key. But somewhere between then and now something changed. Or maybe she changed, or maybe everyone else just forgot she existed. At Lincoln High School, Maya had perfected the art of being nowhere. She walked the crowded hallways during passing period like a ghost. Students pushed past her, laughing with their friends, shouting across the corridor, rushing to their next class. Not one of them saw her. She'd tested this theory once. She stood perfectly still in the middle of the hallway during the busiest time of day. Students flowed around her like water around a rock. Nobody bumped into her. Nobody told her to move. It was like her body took up space, but her existence didn't. Her teachers were worse. Mrs. Rodriguez had taught her English for 2 whole years. 2 years of sitting in the 3rd row, turning in every assignment on time, raising her hand exactly twice per week. Last month, Mrs. Rodriguez had stopped Maya in the hallway and asked if she was new to the school. Maya had just smiled and said yes. It felt easier than explaining. Lunch was the hardest part of the day. Maya used to sit with a group of girls from her middle school. They'd been friendly enough back then. But high school changed things. The girls got interested in boys and sports and drama club. Their lunch table got louder and more crowded. Maya kept sitting with them out of habit, saying less and less as the months went by. One day she'd stayed home with a cold. When she came back the next day, someone else was sitting in her spot. Maya had stood there with her tray, waiting for someone to notice her, to wave her over, to make room. They didn't. They just kept talking, kept laughing, kept existing in a world where she wasn't necessary. She'd eaten lunch in the library ever since. The librarian never asked why. Home wasn't much better. Her parents were important people with important jobs. Her dad worked in finance, always on calls that couldn't be interrupted. Her mom was a lawyer who brought home boxes of files every weekend. They'd loved her once, Maya was sure of it. But love got buried under deadlines and meetings and the slow, quiet death of their marriage. They didn't fight. Fighting would have required them to be in the same room. Instead, they communicated through notes stuck to the refrigerator. Taking the car for maintenance. Working late, dinner and fridge. Mortgage due Friday. Maya had started adding her own notes to see if they'd notice. Failed math test. Joined a cult. Moving to Alaska. None of her notes ever got a response. She eventually stopped writing them. Her birthday last year had been the turning point. She'd turned 14 on a Tuesday. She hadn't expected a party or anything big. Just maybe breakfast together or a card or even just someone saying the words happy birthday. She'd come downstairs that morning to find both her parents already gone. There was $20 on the counter with a note that said, grocery money. No mention of the date. No cake in the fridge. Nothing. She'd gone to school and waited. Surely someone would remember. There was a list of birthdays posted in her homeroom. Surely her teacher would make an announcement like she did for other kids. But 3 o'clock came and went. She walked home alone. Made herself a sandwich. Did her homework. Went to bed. Her parents came home after she was asleep. The $20 stayed on the counter for 3 days before her mom used it to buy coffee. Maya had cried that night, quietly into her pillow so nobody would hear. But then something strange happened. The crying stopped and in its place came a cold, clear thought. What if I just disappeared? Would anyone even notice? She'd tested it in small ways first. She stopped texting her group chat. Nobody asked where she'd gone. She skipped her usual spot in the library. The librarian didn't mention it. She wore the same shirt 3 days in a row. Not one person commented. It was like she was running an experiment on her own life. And the results were coming back the same every time. No one was paying attention. The guidance counselor called her in once. Maya had felt a spike of hope. Maybe someone had noticed. Maybe someone cared, but Mrs. Patterson just needed her to sign up for standardized testing and wanted to remind all sophomores about college planning. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Mrs. Patterson never once asked how she was doing. By winter, Maya had accepted her reality. She was the invisible girl, the forgettable one, the student who'd graduate without a single person remembering her name. She wasn't bullied or hated. That would have at least meant she registered on people's radar. She was simply nothing. A blank space in the yearbook photo. A name on the attendance sheet that teachers marked present without looking up. But accepting it and being okay with it were two different things. Late at night, when the house was dark and quiet and lonely, Maya would stare at her ceiling and wonder what it would take for someone to actually see her. Really see her. Not just glance in her direction, but actually remember she existed. She started researching online, reading about people who'd done extraordinary things. Climbers who'd scaled impossible mountains. Explorers who'd crossed frozen wastelands. Teenagers younger than her who'd accomplished incredible feats. Every story had one thing in common. These people had pushed themselves to the absolute edge of what was possible. And the world had noticed. That's when Maya saw it. A documentary about Eagles Peak. The mountain loomed over their town like a sleeping giant. Local legends said it was impossible to climb alone. Experienced mountaineers attempted it every year. Some succeeded. Some didn't make it back. Maya watched footage of the summit, watched interviews with climbers who'd made it to the top, watched the way people talked about them with respect and admiration and memory. She made her decision that night. If no one was going to remember the invisible girl from Lincoln High, maybe they'd remember the girl who climbed Eagles Peak. Maybe they'd remember her name. Or maybe she'd die trying, and at least then, for a little while, people would feel bad that they'd forgotten her. Either way, she'd finally matter. Maya spent the next 3 months living a double life. During the day, she was still the invisible girl at Lincoln High. But after school, in the privacy of her room, she became someone else. Someone with a purpose, someone preparing for something that would either kill her or finally make her impossible to forget. She started with research, hours and hours of it. She watched every documentary about Eagles Peak she could find. She read climbing blogs, studied weather patterns, memorized trail maps. The mountain was no joke. Even experienced climbers with full teams and support crews had died up there. The altitude, the unpredictable weather, the sheer cliffs, it demanded respect. And Maya, who'd never climbed anything more challenging than the rope in gym class, was planning to go up there alone. People would call it crazy. Suicidal even. And maybe it was. But Maya had done the math in her head 100 times. What was the difference between dying quickly on a mountain and dying slowly from invisibility? At least one death would be remembered. She got a job at the town library. The application had asked why she wanted to work there, and she'd written something about loving books. The real reason was simpler. The library was quiet. It had internet. And the head librarian, Mr. Chen, an elderly man with no relation to her despite the shared last name, seemed to prefer employees who didn't talk much. Being invisible was actually a job qualification. Every paycheck went into a shoebox under her bed. Climbing gear was expensive. She couldn't buy everything new, so she haunted thrift stores and online marketplaces. A used sleeping bag rated for cold weather. A backpack with a torn strap she learned to fix from YouTube videos. Climbing rope from a college student who'd given up on the hobby. Boots that were half a size too big, solved with extra socks. The physical training was harder than she'd expected. Maya had never been athletic. In gym class, she was always picked last, not out of cruelty but out of genuine forgetfulness that she was standing there. But now she had a reason to push her body. She started running before school, when the streets were still dark and empty. At first, she could barely make it 2 blocks without gasping for air, but she kept going. Every morning, rain or shine, she did push-ups in her room until her arms shook. She practiced with the climbing rope in her backyard, learning knots from online tutorials. Figure 8, bowline, clove hitch. Her fingers fumbled at first, but muscle memory eventually took over. She filled her backpack with books and wore it around the house, getting used to weight on her shoulders. Her parents never noticed. They never noticed she was waking up at 5 in the morning. Never noticed the climbing gear hidden in her closet. Never noticed that their daughter was transforming from a ghost into someone with steel in her spine. The only person who came close to seeing was Mr. Chen at the library. One evening, as Maya was checking out books on wilderness survival, he'd glanced at her stack and raised an eyebrow. "Planning a trip?" he'd asked. It was the most personal question anyone had asked her in months. Maya had just shrugged. Maybe. He'd nodded slowly, stamped her books, and said nothing more. But sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. or recognition of something he'd seen in himself once. By May, Maya felt as ready as she'd ever be. She'd studied the weather forecasts. Early June had the most stable conditions. She'd need about 5 days. 3 days up, 1 day at the summit, 1 day down. She'd mapped out spots to camp, identified water sources, planned her meals down to the calorie. The night before she left, Maya did something she hadn't done in months. She had dinner with her parents. Not because they'd invited her. She'd simply walked into the dining room where her mother was eating salad while reading case files, and sat down. Her mom had looked up, surprised to see her. "Oh, hi, honey. There's more salad in the kitchen if you want some." Maya had made herself a plate and sat in silence watching her mother work. Her father came home an hour later, microwaved leftovers, and ate standing at the counter while scrolling through his phone. This was her family. 3 people living in the same house, eating at different times, existing in separate worlds. "I'm going on a trip," Maya said suddenly. The words hung in the air. Her mother looked up from her files. "What? When?" "Tomorrow. A week or so. For a school thing." The lie came easily. Her mother frowned slightly, trying to remember if she'd signed a permission slip or received an email about this. She couldn't remember, which meant she probably hadn't. But admitting that felt like admitting she wasn't paying attention. So she just nodded. "Okay, do you need money?" "No, I'm good." "Be safe," her mother said, already turning back to her work. Her father hadn't even looked up from his phone. Maya went to her room and packed her bag one final time. She checked every item: rope, carabiners, first aid kit, water purification tablets, energy bars. She'd drilled this list into her memory. The bag was heavy, maybe 40 pounds. Her body was ready for it. She set 3 alarms for 4 in the morning, then lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was really happening. In a few hours, she'd be gone. In a few days, she'd either be standing on top of Eagle's Peak or she'd be dead. The weird thing was, she wasn't scared of dying. She was scared of getting hurt badly enough that she'd have to come back. Scared of failing. Scared that even this wouldn't be enough to make people remember her name. But she was doing it anyway. When her alarm went off, Maya got up in the darkness and got dressed. She pulled on her 2 big boots, shouldered her heavy pack. She took one last look at her room. The bed she'd slept in since she was 8. The desk where she'd done countless hours of homework nobody checked. The mirror where she'd watched herself disappear a little more each year. She left a note on the kitchen table. Just 5 words: "Gone climbing. Back in a week." Then she walked out the front door into the pre-dawn darkness. The street was empty. The world was quiet. And for the first time in years, Maya felt completely, terrifyingly alive. The bus to the base of Eagle's Peak left at 6. She was the only passenger. The driver, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, barely glanced at her when she paid the fare. Maya sat in the back and watched the town disappear behind her. Houses gave way to trees. Trees gave way to hills. Hills gave way to the mountain. Eagle's Peak rose against the morning sky like a challenge, like a promise, like the only thing in the world that would finally see her for who she was. Maya shouldered her pack and started walking toward it. The first 2 days on Eagle's Peak were nothing like Maya had imagined. She'd expected fear, danger, maybe even some dramatic moment where she questioned everything. Instead, she found something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The trail started gentle, winding through pine forests that smelled like Christmas and childhood. Her boots crunched on the dirt path. Birds called from the trees. A squirrel watched her pass, completely unafraid. For the first time in forever, being unnoticed felt like a gift instead of a curse. She'd planned her route carefully. The first campsite was only 6 miles in, giving her body time to adjust to the altitude and the weight of her pack. By the time she reached it, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink she'd never seen from her bedroom window. Setting up her tent took longer than it should have. The instructions had made sense on her bedroom floor, but here, with wind tugging at the fabric and her fingers clumsy with exhaustion, everything was harder. But she figured it out. She always figured things out. That was one skill invisibility had taught her. Nobody was coming to help, so you learned to help yourself. She ate dinner straight from the package. Freeze-dried pasta that tasted like cardboard and chemicals, but her body didn't care. She was starving. As darkness fell completely, the temperature dropped fast. Maya crawled into her sleeping bag and lay there, listening to sounds she'd never heard before. The wind moving through trees. Something small scurrying through the underbrush. The absolute silence that exists only in places where humans rarely go. She thought about her parents. Were they home yet? Had they even read her note? Probably not. They'd find it eventually. Probably sometime tomorrow when one of them went looking for coffee filters or paper towels. They'd read it, feel a vague sense that they should be concerned, and then get distracted by work emails. She'd be back before they had time to actually worry. That thought should have made her sad, but it didn't anymore. She'd cried all her tears about that months ago. Day 2 was harder. The trail got steeper. Her legs burned. The pack that had felt manageable yesterday now felt like it was filled with concrete. But Maya pushed through. She'd trained for this. Her body knew what to do even when her mind wanted to quit. She passed another hiker coming down the mountain, a guy in his 30s with expensive gear and the confident walk of someone who'd done this 100 times. He nodded at her as they passed. "Nice day for it," he said. Maya nodded back and he continued down the trail. He wouldn't remember her 5 minutes from now, but that was okay. Up here, being forgettable didn't hurt the same way. By mid-afternoon, she'd reached her second campsite. This one was above the tree line, where the vegetation gave way to rock and thin air. The view was insane. She could see for miles. The town was a tiny collection of buildings in the distance, like a toy village. Somewhere down there was her house, her school, her library job. Her entire life looked so small from up here. She made camp, ate another terrible meal, and watched the sunset. Tomorrow would be the hard part. Tomorrow she'd push for the summit. The weather forecast had been clear. 3 more days of stable conditions. She'd be fine. That night she actually slept well. Her body was exhausted in a good way. The kind of tired that comes from using your muscles instead of just existing. She dreamed about flying. She woke up to wrongness. The air felt different. Heavy. When Maya unzipped her tent, the sky was the color of a bruise. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, moving fast. This wasn't in the forecast. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maya's hands shook as she checked her phone. No signal, which she'd expected. But she'd downloaded weather data before leaving. She pulled it up, hoping she'd misread something. But no, clear skies were supposed to last through Thursday. Today was Tuesday. The first drops of rain hit her tent like thrown pebbles, then more, then a deluge. Maya had to make a choice. Go back down to safety, or push forward to a cave she'd marked on her map about 3 miles ahead. The cave would give her shelter. Going back meant giving up, meant returning to her invisible life having accomplished nothing. She made her decision in about 10 seconds. Forward. Always forward. Breaking camp in the rain was a nightmare. Everything got wet. Her fingers fumbled with the tent poles. The wind tried to rip the fabric from her hands. But she managed it, stuffed everything into her pack, and started hiking. The trail became treacherous almost immediately. Water ran down the path like a stream. Rocks that had been stable yesterday were now slick and dangerous. Maya's boots slipped. She caught herself. Kept moving, the rain turned to hail. Ice pellets stung her face. She pulled her hood tighter and bent into the wind. 3 miles. She could do 3 miles? She'd come too far to turn back now. Thunder rolled across the mountain like a bowling ball. Lightning cracked the sky open. Maya's heart hammered. Every survival guide she'd read said to get low during lightning, to avoid high ground. But she was on high ground. There was nowhere to go but forward. She lost the trail somewhere around mile 2. The rain was so heavy she could barely see 10 feet ahead. Panic tried to claw its way up her throat, but she shoved it down. The cave was northeast. She had a compass. She could navigate by landmarks. That ridge of rocks. That dead tree. She'd studied this mountain for months. The wind got worse. It screamed around her like something alive and angry. Maya's legs were shaking. From cold or exhaustion or fear, she couldn't tell anymore. Maybe all 3. But she kept moving, then she saw it. A dark opening in the rock face, exactly where her map said it would be. The cave. Safety. Maya started toward it, relief flooding through her body. Just 50 more feet. She could make it. She was going to make it. That's when her foot hit a patch of loose rock. It happened so fast. 1 second she was walking. The next, the ground wasn't there anymore. She was falling. Her hands grabbed for something, anything. Her safety rope. The one she'd been so careful to secure snapped like thread. The world spun. Rock rushed past. Pain exploded through her body as she hit something hard. Then again, and again, she came to rest on a narrow ledge, her body twisted at wrong angles. Above her, the storm raged. Below her, she couldn't see anything through the rain and mist. Just darkness. Just empty space. Maya tried to move. White-hot agony shot through her leg. Something was broken. Maybe several somethings. Her ribs screamed when she breathed. Her head throbbed. Blood ran into her eye from somewhere. She was hurt. Badly hurt. And nobody knew where she was. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd come up here to be remembered. And she was going to die forgotten anyway. Not at the summit in some blaze of glory. Just broken on a ledge nobody would find. The cold was already seeping into her bones. Hypothermia would get her before the injuries did, probably. That was almost merciful. Maya closed her eyes. The storm thundered above her like the sky itself was grieving. She thought about her parents, about her note on the kitchen table, about how long it would take before anyone realized she wasn't coming back. Then consciousness slipped away, taking everything with it. Maya woke up to whiteness. For a confused moment, she thought she was in her bed at home, staring at her ceiling. Then the pain hit and memory came flooding back. The storm, the fall, the ledge. She was still alive. That realization felt more like a problem than a miracle. Her left leg was definitely broken. She could see it bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. Her ribs felt like broken glass every time she breathed. Her head pounded. But she was alive, and that meant she had to figure out how to stay that way. The storm had passed. Pale morning light filtered through the mist. Maya managed to shift herself into a semi-sitting position, biting back screams as her body protested. She was on a ledge about 6 feet wide, covered in a thin layer of ice and snow. Below her was nothing but fog and drop-off. Above her, sheer rock face, no way up, no way down. Her pack had somehow stayed with her, tangled in the broken safety rope. With shaking hands, she pulled it closer. Inventory. That's what all the survival guides said. Figure out what you have. Water bottle, half full. 6 energy bars. First aid kit. Emergency blanket. Waterproof matches. No phone signal, which she'd expected. The satellite emergency beacon she'd bought used from that college kit online. Her fingers found the button. She pressed it. A small red light blinked. Help was coming, except help might take days. The beacon gave her coordinates, but in this terrain with this weather, rescue teams couldn't just walk up and get her. They'd need specialized equipment. Perfect conditions. And she'd be lucky if anyone even noticed she was missing yet. Maya wrapped herself in the emergency blanket. It crinkled like aluminum foil and did almost nothing against the cold, but it was better than nothing. She forced herself to eat half an energy bar even though she wasn't hungry. Her body needed fuel. Then she waited. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky but never quite broke through the clouds. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness. When she was awake, the pain was unbearable. When she slept, she had dreams about falling that jerked her awake, making her injuries scream. She thought about a lot of things on that ledge. About how this was supposed to go differently. She was supposed to reach the summit, take a photo, post it online with some caption about overcoming challenges. People would share it. Teachers would see it. Her parents would see it. Everyone would finally know her name. Instead, she was dying on a ledge and nobody even knew she was missing yet. But something strange happened as the hours wore on. Maya found herself thinking less about being remembered and more about just being. About the way the mist moved through the valley below. About a bird that landed near her for a moment before flying away. About how her breath made little clouds in the cold air. Proof that she was still here, still breathing, still existing whether anyone knew it or not. On the second day, she heard the helicopters. The sound started distant, like a mosquito buzzing somewhere far away. Then it grew louder. Maya's heart leaped. She tried to wave her arms, but the pain was too much. She couldn't stand. She couldn't even sit up fully. All she could do was lie there and hope they saw her. The helicopter passed overhead so close she could see its belly. Then it was gone, the sound fading into the distance. Maya cried then. Not the quiet crying she'd done into her pillow on her 14th birthday. Real gut-wrenching sobs that made her broken ribs feel like they were tearing her apart from the inside. They'd been so close, but they came back. That afternoon, or maybe the next day, she'd lost track of time, the helicopter returned. This time it hovered. This time she heard voices over a loudspeaker, though she couldn't make out the words over the rotor wash. A man descended on a cable, landing on the ledge with practiced ease. He was maybe 45, with kind eyes visible through his helmet visor. He knelt beside her immediately, his hands gentle as he checked her injuries. "Hey there," he said, his voice calm. "I'm James. You're going to be okay. Can you tell me your name?" "Maya," she whispered. Her voice came out as a croak. "Maya Chen. Okay, Maya, we're going to get you out of here. This is going to hurt, but I need you to stay with me. Can you do that?" She nodded. She'd survived 4 days on this ledge. She could survive a helicopter ride. They strapped her to a rescue litter, every movement agony. James talked to her the whole time, keeping her conscious, keeping her focused. Then they were lifting off, the ledge falling away beneath them. Maya caught one last glimpse of it, that narrow strip of rock that had kept her alive. Then she was in the helicopter, wrapped in real blankets, warm air blasting from somewhere. An EMT was checking her vitals, starting an IV, doing 100 professional things. "The whole state's been looking for you," James said, sitting beside her. "You're national news, kid." Maya processed this slowly. National news. Everyone looking for her. It was everything she'd wanted. But it felt different now. Hollow somehow. The hospital was chaos. Bright lights. Rushing nurses. Doctors asking questions she could barely answer. Her parents appeared, and that was the weirdest part. Her mom was crying, actually crying, mascara running down her face. Her dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. They grabbed her hands, careful of the IV lines, and wouldn't let go. "We're so sorry," her mom kept saying. "We're so sorry." Maya didn't know what to say to that. Sorry for what? For not noticing she was invisible? For not reading her note for 2 days? For only caring now that she was almost dead? But she was too tired to be angry. She just closed her eyes and let them hold her hands. The next few days blurred together. Surgery on her leg. Pills for pain that made everything fuzzy. A parade of visitors. Teachers she'd had for years suddenly remembering her name. Classmates bringing flowers and stuffed animals, claiming they'd been friends. The principal came. The guidance counselor came. Everyone came, news crews camped outside. Her story was everywhere. Teen survives 4 days on mountain. Miracle rescue on Eagles Peak. Her face on every screen, every feed, every website. Finally, people knew her name, but they didn't know her. They knew the story. The brave girl who climbed alone. The survivor. The miracle. They saw what they wanted to see. Only one visitor felt real. James, the rescue pilot, came by on a quiet evening when the circus had finally died down. He didn't bring flowers. He sat in the chair beside her bed and was quiet for a moment. "You remind me of someone," he finally said. "My daughter. She was 16. Was past tense." Maya heard it. She felt invisible. James continued, staring at his hands. Felt like nobody saw her. "I was busy with work, always telling her we'd talk later, always putting her off. She tried to tell us, tried to show us, but we weren't paying attention." He looked up at Maya. "She killed herself 5 years ago." The room felt very small suddenly, very quiet. "I've saved 32 people from that mountain," James said. "Every single one. I wonder if I'm making up for not saving her. I know that's not how it works. But when I saw you on that ledge," he shook his head. "You survived for a reason, Maya. Don't let them make you invisible again. And don't make yourself invisible either." After he left, Maya lay in the dark hospital room, listening to the beep of machines, thinking about his words, about being seen, about being invisible, about the difference between existing and mattering. She'd climbed that mountain to be remembered. But maybe she'd been asking the wrong question all along. Maya returned to school 6 weeks later, walking with a cane and a clarity most people spend their whole lives searching for. The attention had faded, exactly like she knew it would. The news crews had moved on to the next story. The flowers in her hospital room had wilted and been thrown away. The cards from classmates who barely knew her name were stuffed in a drawer somewhere at home. Her Instagram post about the climb had gotten thousands of likes, but the comments had slowed to a trickle, then stopped completely. She was yesterday's news, old news, already half forgotten again, and the weird thing was, it didn't hurt anymore. Her first day back, people stared. Of course they stared. She was the girl who'd almost died on Eagles Peak. But Maya noticed something interesting. They weren't really seeing her. They were seeing the story, the legend, the dramatic rescue, not the actual person walking through the hallway with a cane and a backpack that was way too heavy, but she refused to ask for help carrying. A group of girls from her grade, ones who'd never spoken to her before, came up to her at lunch. "Oh my God, Maya, that's so crazy what happened to you. You're so brave. We should totally hang out sometime." Maya looked at them, really looked, saw the performance of it. The way they were already glancing at their phones, probably thinking about how they'd post about being friends with the mountain girl. They didn't want to know her. They wanted to be adjacent to her story. Maybe, Maya said, and kept walking. She didn't go to the cafeteria. She went to the library like always. Mr. Chen was at his usual spot behind the checkout desk. He looked up when she came in, gave her a small nod, and went back to his book. No questions about the mountain. No dramatic reunion. Just the same quiet acknowledgement he'd always given her. Maya sat at her usual table and pulled out her homework. For the first time in months, it felt good to be in this quiet space, to not be performing, to not be anyone's inspiration or cautionary tale, to just exist. But she wasn't the same girl who used to hide in this library. Something had changed on that ledge. When you spend 4 days thinking you're going to die, you get really clear on what matters. And what Maya had figured out was this. She'd been so desperate to be remembered that she'd forgotten to remember herself. She started small. She joined the environmental club, something she'd been interested in for years but never had the courage to show up for. The first meeting was awkward. People knew who she was or thought they did. But after a few minutes of discussing trail conservation and watershed protection, the novelty wore off. She was just another member, another voice, and that felt perfect. She went to a student council meeting and actually spoke, not about her climb, about the lack of mental health resources at school, about how students like her, quiet students, struggling students, fell through the cracks because nobody was looking. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled. But she said what needed to be said. The vice principal, who'd never noticed her in 4 years, suddenly seemed very interested in implementing new support systems. Maya would believe it when she saw it, but at least the conversation had started. She started writing too. Real writing. Not the essays she turned in for English class that said what teachers wanted to hear. Honest writing about what it felt like to be invisible, about the lengths people go to when they need to be seen, about loneliness and desperation and the moment on the ledge when she'd realized she wanted to live, even if nobody remembered her name. Her English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, the one who'd asked if Maya was new after 2 years of teaching her, called her after class one day. "This essay," she said, holding up Maya's latest assignment. "It's powerful, raw. Have you ever thought about submitting to the youth writing competition? The deadline's next month." Maya hadn't thought about it, but she took the information and submitted her essay that night. Not because she wanted to win, but because the words needed to exist somewhere outside her head. 3 weeks later, she won first place. The prize ceremony was small. Local newspaper. a $100 gift card. A certificate. Nothing like the media frenzy after her rescue. But when they called her name and she walked up to accept the award, using her cane because her leg still wasn't right, she felt something she hadn't felt when she was national news. She felt seen. Actually seen. Not for surviving something dramatic, but for creating something honest. Home was still complicated. Her parents had been different since the accident. They'd started family therapy, which was awkward and painful and sometimes made things worse before they made things better. Her dad had actually taken a week off work, something Maya couldn't remember him ever doing. Her mom had cleared her schedule for Tuesday dinners, no phones, no files, just conversation. They were trying. That was more than she'd had before. One night at dinner, her mom asked, "Why did you climb that mountain?" It was the first time anyone had asked her why. Everyone else wanted to know how. How she survived, how she stayed warm, how she felt when the helicopter came. But her mom was asking why. Maya thought about it. "I wanted to matter," she finally said. "I wanted people to remember me." Her mom's eyes filled with tears. "We should have made you feel like you mattered every single day. I'm sorry we didn't." Her dad reached across the table and took Maya's hand. He didn't say anything, but his grip was tight. Present. There. It wasn't everything fixed. It wasn't a miracle transformation. But it was a start. On the 1-year anniversary of her rescue, Maya did something that surprised even herself. She went back to Eagles Peak, not to climb it, not to prove anything, James, the rescue pilot, had offered to take her and she'd said yes. They stood at the base of the mountain looking up at the peak hidden in clouds. James had brought flowers, the biodegradable kind that wouldn't harm the environment. For his daughter, he'd said. Maya had brought a small notebook and a pen. She wrote down names. Her own name first. Then she wrote the names of people who felt invisible. Kids from school she'd noticed in the margins, the ones who moved through hallways like ghosts. She'd started a project online, collecting stories from teenagers who felt forgotten. The response had been overwhelming. Hundreds of stories. Thousands. All these invisible kids who just needed someone to acknowledge they existed. She tore out the pages carefully and folded them into paper birds, origami she'd learned from a YouTube tutorial. James released his flowers into the wind. Maya released her paper birds. They caught the breeze and scattered, some tumbling down, some sailing up toward the peak. All of them carrying names of people who deserve to be remembered. You know what I realized up there on that ledge? Maya said, watching the paper birds disappear into the sky. I was asking the wrong question. I kept thinking, how do I make people remember me? But the better question was, how do I remember that I matter even when nobody's watching? James nodded slowly. That's a hard lesson. Most people never learn it. I almost died learning it, Maya said. But I'm glad I did. Not the almost dying part, the learning part. They stood there for a while in comfortable silence. The mountain loomed above them, indifferent and eternal. It hadn't cared about Maya's need to be remembered. It hadn't cared about her survival. It simply existed, massive and real, whether anyone was looking at it or not. Maya had thought she needed to conquer the mountain to matter. But the mountain had taught her something else entirely. You didn't need to be the loudest, the boldest, the most dramatic to have value. You just needed to be real, to show up, to exist with intention. Even in the quiet moments nobody else noticed. She was still that girl. The quiet one. The one who'd rather listen than talk. The one who faded into the background at parties. But now she knew that being quiet didn't mean being invisible. It didn't mean she didn't matter. She mattered because she was here. Because she chose to be here. Because every morning she woke up and decided to exist fully, whether anyone was paying attention or not. The sky above Eagle's Peak was vast and blue and infinite. Maya looked up at it and smiled. The sky had found her once, pulled her back from the edge of death. But she'd found herself too, and that made all the difference.